It's everyday wear and tear on your instruments that they should be caught within sterile processing, but they're not. So I'm the second set of eyes on that tray. And that second set of eyes on the tray, that's when I start noticing things.
Clock in, scrub up, and join us behind the red line. You're listening to First Case, a perioperative podcast bringing you exciting interviews, engaging discussions, and innovative solutions that are changing the way patients receive surgical care. Each episode, we talk to frontline staff, perioperative leadership, and nursing entrepreneurs from across the country as they share their stories, experience, and expertise on the industry we love. From the back table to the boardroom, from wheels in to wheels out, we tackle the real-life issues affecting the OR. Whether you're tuning in for surgical service education or inspiration, we're glad you're here. And now, it's time to roll back and start the first case.
This week on First Case, we speak with Angelia Limberios, Implementation and Repair Specialist with Northfield Medical. Angelia started in 2002 as a traveler specializing in neurosurgery and open heart as a surgical technologist. In 2009, she left the OR for a role as an OR liaison, serving as a bridge between the sterile processing department and the operating room, troubleshooting and resolving issues with instruments, and educating SPD and quality assurance. From there, Angelia was trained to do instrument repairs. Her knowledge within the OR and as a liaison combined her passion and love for the operating room and commitment to the patient has been an asset in her current role. She now travels the U.S. to implement new customers for Northfield Medical, and she also trains and transitions employees into the repair specialist role, setting standards and expectations to meet customers' needs and working closely with team leads, supervisors, and staff. And Jeremy, I've had an experience working with Angelia in the past with a prior employer, and I can just tell you she does a great job combining all of those experiences that we just outlined in her bio to really deliver a quality service to the customers. But she's just got such a unique perspective, having been a surgical tech and really knowing how these instruments are used in the operating room. I can't wait to talk to her about it today and share her knowledge with the audience.
I think that is really, really the key to this interview is the knowledge deficit that we have in the OR. Or that I had personally, I guess I can speak for myself there, not knowing really kind of the lifespan of the instrument. I had it, for the hour of the case and not knowing what all that instrument needs to go through in order to protect that investment for the hospital. It would be an exciting interview to do and for her to get to share her knowledge. I am interested in the instrument repair tech role. I think that it's a role that organizations don't often have, and maybe this will help convince some of them that they need one.
All right. Well, I can tell you, you're absolutely right about that. Not everybody commits to preventive maintenance, and we're going to hear a lot about why they should on today's episode. We're going to be right back after a short break with Angelia Limberios, Implementation and Repair Specialist with Northfield Medical.
You're listening to the First Case podcast.
Joining us now is Angelia Limberios, Implementation Specialist and Repair Specialist with Northfield Medical. And Angelia, I'm really excited to have you on the show today because this topic is one that is very near and dear to my heart, as you know, because we have worked together in the past. But we're going to be talking about instrument inspection, instrument repair, and really from a perspective of your experience having been a surgical tech in the past. So thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Thanks for having me, Justin.
So why don't we talk about your diverse background? First, what kind of led you to becoming a surgical tech? And then we'll talk more about how your career evolved.
Well, I've always had a passion for working with people, and I started out as a surgical tech and had the dreams of going on to nursing school. Coming out of surgical tech school, I actually went straight into traveling. I dove in head first, so there was no playing around. I'm going out there and get my feet wet. and I packed up my car and drove out to Arizona. So I spent some time in Arizona, walked into it very blindly, but I was self-driven and had just the passion and great mentors around me, and they accepted me.
I'll tell you, that mentorship piece is really critical. And we've talked about that, if not directly, as a theme on so many of these episodes so far. And I'm also interested because I know that your experience kind of rounded out into sterile processing, and you became a OR liaison, and your whole role was to connect the dots between the sterile processing department and the OR to maybe smooth out the bumps when it comes to instrumentation and having everything ready for the case. Is that correct?
That is correct. So going into the OR liaison role, that was another role that I just jumped right into feet first. But being in the OR and hearing the complaints of the surgeons on a daily basis, just about instrumentation and, oh, this doesn't work right, or just something is always being brought up. So it helped me develop a process that I implemented myself and made my rounds daily within the OR to help eliminate and go back and be that bridge between the OR and sterile processing to educate the sterile processing department of the flaws that they were seeing or the complaints that they were receiving to eliminate them. So it was really important that I focused on what I was doing and sat and inspected with the surgeons and or the team leads in the room what the problems were.
Yeah, I think that shoulder to shoulder piece is critical, and it's so hard to catch it in the moment to actually get really the feedback that is so critical to making any kind of an improvement. And I love the fact that you used the word process. So let's round this out, because then somehow you went from surgical tech to OR liaison, and now you're an instrument repair specialist and you're repairing stainless steel instruments. So how did that happen?
So you're going to laugh at me when I tell you this, but I never even knew that this was I'm going to call it a career, because I've made a career of it. And I never even knew that this was out there. I really thought that the instruments came back from sterile processing almost like brand new all the time. And I never knew that this career was out there. I actually, with the liaison role, wanted to get closer to home, and they did not have anything in that liaison role for me. So I said, well, what about instrument repair? And they kind of laughed at me, and they said, well, it's a male dominant field. Oh, you just challenged me. I'm up for the challenge. Let's go. So I was the first female hired with my previous employer, and I spent 7 years with them. I developed a very strong passion for making sure that every instrument I laid my hands upon, I would have used upon myself and or a family member. And my background with the surgical tech really helped me progress further in my career to being an implement specialist with my current employer.
I did not know that instrument repair specialists existed either until I became a team leader and I was running back and forth to sterile processing with trays or with instruments or getting called about complaints. And we had stuff had to get it fixed or had to get it sharpened. I didn't know that role existed. Can you talk a little bit more about how your OR experience helped you succeed in that new career?
So obviously with the surgeon complaints, just a needle holder's not properly holding a needle. Why isn't it properly holding a needle? Well, that I learned in my training to become an instrument repair specialist, how to check for that and how to understand moving that metal and why you're moving that metal to obviously do a cost preventative repair to the customer, I guess you could say, so that you're doing preventative maintenance on the instruments. It just went hand in hand so that I knew how the instruments functioned. So repairing them came second nature to me. I knew what I was looking for.
Maybe you could talk a little bit about the training that goes in, because I know, I should say, I'm pretty certain that there's no formal training programs out there. And so, I can see where your experience, as you just said, knowing how the instruments function and how they're expected to function could really help you in your role, because when it comes to testing the repair after the fact, you have some pretty good insights into how it's supposed to perform.
That's true. There's really not a training program out there other than we do have an apprenticeship program within our company. And we try to put the guys and or the girls with somebody that has years of experience. So with that being said, you kind of learn from the experience of your elders or your mentors within that. It's a unique training. So with the unique training, you have to self-educate too. If you're not self-educating at home, you're not in the right field.
So I want to know, one of the challenges that I see from an accreditation standpoint with sterile processing departments, and I think where a lot of instrument damage happens, is at the actual point of use and cleaning or lack thereof at the point of use. Can you talk a little bit about why that's important and how you can protect the financial investment of the organization?
Definitely. So the point of use care is very critical. When I implement new business with my current employer, that's one of the things that I like to do is I could like to go up into the OR and work with the scrub techs, the nurses, the team leads, and give them education and tell them the importance of the point of use. It all starts with them. During the case, the surgical tech is wiping down the instruments before handing them to the surgeon, getting them back from the surgeon. You still wipe them down with your lap sponge. One of the most important things, and you see a lot of it, is that you're not using sterile water. Your labor and delivery instruments, they're being put into a saline. And that actually causes them to pit, because a lot of times your labor and delivery are left overnight. They're blood soiled. It just erodes at the surgical steel. So it's so important to have that point of use education. And I make that one of my primary focuses when starting and implementing new business within our accounts.
I'm curious about that a little bit because, I survey all over the country. And of course, we've seen this adoption of sprays that, pre-soaks that are sprayed on the instruments in the OR. Have you seen that people have gone away from just generally wiping down the instruments and just depending on this spray that they can kind of spray across the instrument trays and just not just doing basic wiping of the instrument?
Well, you're lucky if you get to see them spraying the instruments down because lot of people...
I'm in the hospital, so naturally they're going to spray.
You're very lucky. They should have a pre-enzymatic soak sprayed across them. It should be policy across the United States, across everywhere. It just helps. Do I see it all the time? No. Do I see it with a certain percentage? It's a give or take. But I can say that it's not a regular practice. And I wish that it was and that we see more of it, because on the repair side of things, we do see a lot of damage. And it's so preventative that just that education, it takes you right back to education, that education could save the hospital money in the long run.
Yeah, and I just think you're right. It's a knowledge deficit that I just don't think the OR staff really know how damaging those instruments can be. And I think you make a really, really valid point, and you really have to look at those ancillary departments that sterile processing services, such as the cath lab and OB, the emergency room, where those instruments may be sitting for long periods of time with bioburden or in saline. Yes,
that's so true. I wish that I could wave a magic wand and all of that happen. It doesn't happen. I wish that the OR staff, and I really would hope that they would go down and spend a week in sterile processing department. They could get a firsthand look at what goes on down there from day to day. It's a department that is truly overlooked across the globe, and it's the one that needs the most recognition. They are the heart and soul of every hospital across the globe. Without sterile processing, a hospital doesn't really function. They pull your supplies, they pull everything.
No, I think you're right. I think we overlook sterile processing too often from the OR perspective. And one of the attitudes that I hear a lot, especially when we try to enforce having sterile water on the back table, wiping your instruments down, spraying them with the gel spray after the case. And I do orthopedics. Orthopedics can be fast and furious, and our reamers and broaches are filthy, and we got to keep going. But the attitude is, why am I doing sterile processing's job? Why do I have to do it for them when that's what they're here for? In your education for scrub techs or surgical techs in the OR, how do you approach that so that everyone realizes that it's not one person's job or another person's job, but it's all of us working together to make sure that we're protecting all of these instruments?
So it's obviously a team effort. Turnaround time, you mentioned that. You only have so many trays, and you may have more cases than you have of trays. So it helps. It's a team process. It helps sterile processing do their job. They're able to organize it in a more organized fashion by you guys up in the OR sending it down to sterile processing and taking the extra steps as you're doing it right back to the point of use. It's the point of use. It's handed to you. Yes, it is a fast-paced case, but it's also preventing delay in your next case, possibly, because you may have limited number of trays, and that tray has to be turned around. So it has to go through that whole process downstairs in sterile processing, and that's a long process. And it's not just orthopedic trays that they're servicing that day. There's general, there's neuro, there's all kinds of trays that are coming through, and it's just not, it may be a priority, but it's not a priority if you're not working as a team. It takes a team effort.
So, Angela, you were just talking about the fact that you would go into the OR and you would meet with the team leaders and you'll talk. I think that's really important that you take that time out as a service provider to communicate and share that knowledge like you were talking about. But I'm also interested in the fact that because you were a surgical tech, do you feel like if you go and have a conversation around point of use cleaning, do they listen to you differently when you share that information than maybe when it's coming from a different source?
I do. I tell them my background. I always introduce myself, and I make it very clear when I'm implementing new business where I come from. I want them to know me, and I want them to feel comfortable with who I am and in the role that I'm in. I have such a great passion for what I do that I had a customer come to me, and I was training and implementing in a apprentice, and I had kind of cut my ties with them, and I got a call from the customer and said, "Hey, I've got some concerns here." And I said, "Well, what are they?" And, "Well, the person's just not as passionate as you." So it takes me back to my passion side of my things that I do. I put my heart and soul into everything. And when I'm talking with my customers, I let them know that my passion is there. They see my passion, they see my drive, and I hope that I can share that with them so that they pick up on it and maybe have that same drive and that same passion.
Yeah, I know from working with you that you set quite the standard, and that's good. Because if you're going to raise the bar in any industry, you definitely have to have those higher expectations. Why don't we talk about some best practices around preventive maintenance? So in your opinion, and I think I know the answer to this one, but how often should instruments be inspected and then service performed on them? And when I say instruments, I'm really speaking very specifically around stainless steel instruments, laparoscopic instruments, general instrumentation, etc.
So it should go on usage. Hopefully there's a tracking system within the hospital, and you're able to use that tracking system as to how many times the tray has been used in a room. I'd like to kind of set your standards around 25 for your orthopedic trays and that kind of stuff. If you see they're getting really beat up, you might have to adjust that a little bit. Depends on how often they're used. But obviously, setting a standard across the board, your lap instruments, so important that they're checked every time that they come through. That's working with sterile processing directly, making sure they have a lap tester and at every instrument that comes through that they're being tested. So just setting up a preventative maintenance routine with the customer is important. It's set up on par levels. Justin, you've been very successful with helping in some of that implementation with some of the customers I've worked with, and you still are a great resource when it comes to that.
Yeah, I think, as you mentioned, the usage base is so critical, but it's having a baseline and then being able to take feedback, because you have the ability to really look at these instruments a lot more closely than anybody else, including sterile processing. Even though they're cleaning and inspecting, your eyes, it's the only thing that you do. It's 100% focused on the instrument, and you take a lot more time with each instrument maybe than anybody else would. And everybody, it's about calling everybody's attention to the right areas for inspection. Where are the common problems? And so why don't we talk about that? Where are some of the common issues that you find with instruments? So if you're going to find a crack in a scissor, where do you find it? If you're going to find right in the lockbox, what are some other common areas where you'll find issues that people need to be looking for?
So obviously in the shanks of the scissors, obviously the blades, you'll see a lot of pitting at the tips of them. Your Kellys, your hemostats, anything that is serrated, they get damaged from improper use. You have doctors using rongeurs as pin cutters or pin pullers, and it's everyday wear and tear on your instruments that they should be caught within sterile processing, but they're not. So I'm the second set of eyes on that tray, and that second set of eyes on the tray, that's when I start noticing things. I'm testing them. I'm visually inspecting, and like Justin said, that's all I do all day long. So I know exactly what I'm looking for. In the inner lock boxes, you see grooves. Sometimes when the instrument is too tight, it starts grooving on the inner lock box. Those grooves now are harboring bioburden, possibly. So if that is not removed from service and sent out to repair, to be repaired, it's harboring bioburden.
So I have a quick question. I think one that we often find in the OR, and that is, when you're working with the surgeon and he says, "Oh my gosh, I don't make sure these scissors never find their way in my hands again," and then of course we inevitably put them right back in that tray. We don't communicate that to anybody, and we get in this cycle of craziness where we're repeating the same behaviors, expecting different results. Can you talk a little bit about ways that organizations can improve that process so that they do elevate this to the instrument repair or inspection process?
That has to be communicated. Some hospitals practice putting in repair tags into their containers. I see where they get processed right through the department and they're in a sterile tray so that if they have a bad instrument, they're able to tag it right there. It has to come to communication. Lack of communication will start raising. So where that team lead's in the room constantly because you have that surgeon complaining. So there has to be communication. Just steps to take is tagging it out, putting it aside.
And I think trying to grab information about what the complaint is. How often do you meet with those surgeons, Angela? Let's say there's a common complaint that's coming up. Do you go meet with the surgeons and talk through it with them? Because I know you said before, sometimes they're using the instrument for the wrong purpose. They may not have the right instrument for the job even available in the set. How do you help troubleshoot?
Yes, I definitely offer to the team lead to come in, observe surgery, see how the surgeon is using the instrument, and maybe direct them or talk with that surgeon directly, proper use of the instrument, is critical. A lot of times you have surgeons that are wanting the osteotome sharpened a different way or a kerrison sharpened a different way. And why they want it sharpened a different way is obviously the technique of how they are using it. So that is critical in our repair side. And it's very important that the repair specialist has that connection with the team leads so that when those situations do arise, that you're able to have that communication with the team lead and you can go in and help them troubleshoot and once again build a bridge and take the heat off of anybody that's in the OR, because we know that you guys run nonstop. You're there and you're nonstop, and anything that we can do to reduce that and take away that heat that you're getting, we help with that.
So what about instrument staining and discoloration? You know, that can be a real big challenge for a lot of hospitals. And I almost feel like sometimes you just get used to it. And so you just let it go, right? Nobody really kind of goes after it and addresses it. And then how do you know if it's staining or if the instrument's rusting or if it's actually, you know, blood or bioburden that hasn't been cleaned off? What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, I have a lot of thoughts on that. I probably don't have enough time to even talk on that subject. But staining, I do see a lot of that. And then it takes you back to troubleshooting. How often are the filters changed? Is the water hard? Are other parameters right on their washers? Have their sterilizers been cleaned? There's so many different processes and troubleshooting options that you can go through. And that's where it takes it back to the OR director, to the sterile processing director, the management, and anything that you can do to help them troubleshoot that. Taking pictures and showing them how it comes out to the repair lab, and then the process that we take and put it through a cleaner and our sonics, and sometimes they have to be bead blasted. It just depends on the finish and that's supposed to be on that instrument. Just so many different processes, but documenting it and showing the customer is so important on our side as repair specialists.
Right, because everybody thinks it's just a one-off scenario, or that doesn't happen very often, or we don't do that. And then when you see the pattern emerging, I want to end on this kind of conversation and just have you elaborate a little bit more, maybe even just share a story without really divulging a customer name or anything like that. Share a story with us about how pictures have helped you create an aha moment and helped an organization, whether it's a hospital or a surgery center, help them improve what they're doing. And really it's all comes down to the quality of the instrumentation that gets reprocessed and back into the surgeon's hands.
So a lot of that comes with leadership. You have to have a great leadership team. So the people that are within your management have to utilize the tools that I give back to them, because that is a tool, and we use it for educational purposes too. So it's kind of telling a story of what we do in the process of our repairs throughout a day, and it takes it back to the managers up in the OR, takes it and shows the damage. So it's just a full circle of point of use, care and handling of the instruments, making sure that your par levels and all of your washers and sterilizers are where they're supposed to be, that they're cleaned on a regular basis. It just has to come full circle. So when you take that and you present it back to a customer, a lot of times what I do is we're going in on a trial and we're sometimes showing, I would say, mistakes or improper sharpening techniques, double edges on scissors. So it's showing a story of what we're seeing, and it's adding value to what we do on a daily basis.
And do you feel like it justifies why they're making that investment? Because I feel like it's the repair budget that always gets hacked away at. And then they don't necessarily realize that they're buying new instruments because they're not taking care of the ones they already bought.
That is so true. I think it's key. I really do. And when it goes to upper management and they sit in on a business review, I think they have aha moments like, wow, I did not realize this, and just how much money they can save by proceeding with that contract or whatever it is and utilizing us as repair specialists.
Yeah, that's where that preventive maintenance comes into play, and especially usage-based, because then you can map that out. You can have a really good plan. You have a process improvement every time there's a surgeon complaint, especially if it's not from an abuse of an instrument, but it's just literally the repair schedule is not frequent enough, and you can really dial that in. I've seen you work magic, Angela, and really turn things out in a short period of time at several hospitals where you and I had collaborated in the past. And so I just want to thank you for sharing your insights today on this episode of First Case. Nice job.
Thanks, Justin. Thanks, Jeremy and Melanie, for your time, too. It was nice meeting you both.
That was Angelia Limberios, implementation specialist and repair specialist with Northfield Medical. And Melanie, I think this is an area that doesn't get talked about, not just instrument repair and maybe the training that goes in behind it and what the job is like, but even more just about inspection. And this episode really does tag along really well with our last episode with Megan Mullinax and just talking about that training that surgical techs go through, and especially around inspection and instrumentation. I feel like it's a much more deeper dive in that role. And I know that it prepared Angela for her job, but, I think she underplayed it a little bit. But I know her experience as a surgical tech has allowed her to partner with the team leads because she knows what their job is like. She knows what they do every single day. And I know that has benefited her not only in them being willing to listen to what she has to say, but also her ability to diagnose issues and really relate and then talk about how she's going to fix it and gain confidence. So really a lot of good information in today's episode.
Yeah, I really learned a lot listening to her talk. And I think you're right. Her experience as a surgical tech, I think, was fundamental in her ability to understand the instruments, to understand the needs of the surgeons, but then also to be able to carry that information into sterile processing. And and be able to explain issues that surgeons were having. And I think, like you said, give her that credibility with staff in the OR because she's done their job too and understands it. And she just really did a good job explaining why her role is critical and so important.
All right, well, that's going to do it for this week's show. As a reminder, you can help support First Case by subscribing on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast application. We'd certainly appreciate a rating and a review because your feedback is important to the show. And on behalf of Jeremy, Melanie, and myself, thank you for listening to this episode of First Case.